The call came at 9:47 p.m. and Seo Jinho didn't take it. He let it ring, watched his father's name pulse on the screen 3 times, then turned the phone face down on his desk and went back to the contract in front of him. Whatever it was could wait. Everything his father wanted could wait. That was the one freedom Jinho had given himself in 41 years of being a CEO. The freedom to make his father wait. The building was almost empty. Chansung Tower at this hour was all echoing elevators and security monitors, and the particular silence of a place that runs on human energy and has temporarily run out. Jinho preferred it this way. He did his clearest thinking when everyone else had gone home. He was reaching for his pen when the call came through on the desk line. Internal, lobby security. He picked up. "Sir, when there's a situation at the main entrance, a woman and a child, she's been standing in the rain for about 12 minutes and she's refusing to leave. We've asked twice." "Then ask a third time." "We did, sir. The child is the one talking. She's asking for the man who runs the building." Jinho set the pen down. There was something in the way the guard said it. Not alarm, not irritation, but a specific discomfort, the kind that comes from a situation that doesn't fit any of the usual categories. He stood up. He told himself it was a routine security matter. He told himself that all the way to the elevator. He told himself that right up until the lobby doors opened and he saw her. She was drenched the way only people caught completely unprepared get drenched. Not just wet hair and damp clothes, but soaked through. His jacket plastered to her arms, water running in thin lines down her face like the rain had simply decided to pass through her. She wasn't shaking. She was very still, which was somehow worse. Standing in the yellow light of the lobby entrance with the kind of stillness that comes from having run out of the energy required to fall apart. The child beside her was different. The child was watching the security guard with the focused attention of someone running calculations. 6 years old maybe. Small. Dry beneath a hood that she had pulled up with apparent competence. When Jinho came through the doors, she turned first, before the woman, before anyone else, and looked at him directly. He almost looked away. There was something in that look that was too steady for a child's face. He crossed the lobby, stopped 6 feet from them. The woman turned at the sound of his footsteps, and he got his first clear look at her face. He didn't recognize her. Not immediately. 7 years had moved through her face the way weather moves through a landscape. Not destroying it, just changing what stood where. And his memory of her was layered under grief and deliberate forgetting, and 2 years of therapy his father had arranged, and 4 more years of burying himself in work. So no, he didn't recognize the face. But then his eyes dropped to her left hand, hanging at her side, knuckles pale from cold. And the ring stopped his heart. White gold, narrow band. A line of inlaid dark amber running the full circumference. Not a stripe, more like a river seen from altitude. Winding slightly, organic. He had spent 3 weeks describing it to the jeweler in Insadong, a man who had since retired and closed his shop and could not be commissioned again. He had held the finished piece in his jacket pocket for 4 months before he found the right moment. He knew every millimeter of that ring. He knew it the way you know a scar, not by looking but by muscle memory, by the particular texture of something that changed you. And on the inside of the band, in letters small enough that you had to hold it close, a 4-word engraving in Yoruba. Iwa Renilemi, your character is my home. She had laughed when he told her what it meant, accused him of being unable to simply say the obvious thing, of wrapping love in architecture because direct emotion made him unreliable. She had been entirely correct, and he had not argued because she was almost always entirely correct, and arguing with her felt like arguing with weather. He was standing 6 feet from her. She was looking at him the way you look at a stranger who is mildly blocking your path. Not hostility, not recognition. Just the polite, slightly exhausted assessment of someone who has already had a long night. She didn't know him. He heard one of the security guards shift his weight, heard the rain against the glass, heard his own pulse doing something irregular. The child spoke. "Are you the man with the blue door?" The question landed with the precision of something thrown by someone who knew exactly where to aim. Jinho looked down at her. "Where did you hear that?" "Mama wrote it down," the child said. Her voice was unhurried. She had the composure of someone who had rehearsed this and was now simply executing it. She said if something bad happened, I should find the man with the blue door. 22nd floor, Chansung Tower. The 22nd floor executive suite had been renovated 14 months ago. Before the renovation, the door had been painted a deep maritime blue, a design choice made by an interior decorator whose brief had come, in small, specific ways, from a woman who had opinions about color and light and had not been shy about sharing them. The door had been repainted during the renovation. There was no record of the original color in any public document. No one alive should have known about that door except Jinho. He looked at the woman, at Zara. Because his mind had already closed the distance, his logic was still trying to maintain. She was looking back at him with those clear, exhausted eyes. She did not know him. And he understood in that moment that whatever had happened to her, whatever had been done, this was not a performance. She was not hiding. She was genuinely, completely lost, which meant someone else had done the hiding for her. Get them dry clothes, he said quietly to his head of security. Hospitality suite on 12. No documentation, no calls, nothing moves until I say so. He turned and walked back to the elevator. Inside, alone going up, he pressed both palms flat against the wall and closed his eyes. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. He didn't sleep, not because he tried and failed, because he didn't attempt it. He sat at his desk with the contract still open in front of him and didn't touch it. And the hours moved around him the way they do when a person has left the normal current of time and is sitting in something else entirely. By 2 a.m., he had pulled every file he still kept offline. The missing persons report his team had filed 7 years ago. 40 pages of nowhere. Every lead dissolving into dead ends. Every witness account contradicting the next. The police summary that used words like inconclusive and insufficient evidence, the way people use furniture, to fill space, to give the impression of a room that functions. The death in absentia paperwork his lawyers had eventually filed because the estate couldn't remain in legal limbo indefinitely. Why, he had signed those papers at his father's dining room table. His father had handed him the pen with the quiet efficiency of a man completing a task he had been waiting on. Jinho looked at his own signature on the page for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Park Do-yeon at 4:17 a.m. Do-yeon picked up on the second ring, which told Jinho that Do-yeon had either been awake or had trained himself to wake instantly, and both options were equally plausible. He was ex-detective, 15 years in financial crimes before Jinho had hired him away, and he had the particular metabolism of a man who had spent too long working cases that didn't sleep. I need you on something, Jinho said. Personal, nothing digital. You write it, you hand-deliver it, you don't store copies. A pause. That kind of personal. Yes. He sent 3 photos through an encrypted channel. The woman at the lobby entrance. A close shot of the ring on her hand that he'd taken while pretending to check his phone. A frame from the lobby camera that showed her face clearly. Find out who she is, where she's been, how she got that ring, and Do-yeon, if something doesn't make sense, you call me before you write it anywhere. He hung up, sat in the dark for another hour. Then he got up, changed his shirt, and went down to the 12th floor. She was awake, sitting at the window with borrowed clothes that were 2 sizes too large, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a cup of tea balanced on her knee that had clearly gone cold. The city below was doing what cities do before dawn, moving in the specific register of people who work while everyone else sleeps. She was watching it with the focused attention of someone trying to read a language they almost recognize. Nia was asleep on the couch behind her, one shoe on, one shoe off, a small arm thrown over her face. Jinho sat in the chair across from Zara. He didn't speak. He had always understood that silence was a form of information, that what you chose not to fill told a person as much as what you said. She broke it first. Your security people said you own this building. Yes. All of it. All of it. She looked at him with something that wasn't quite suspicion and wasn't quite trust. Something in between. The provisional assessment of a person who has learned to be careful. And why did you let us stay? You looked like you needed somewhere to be. She absorbed this. looked back at the window. I feel like I've been running for a long time. I don't know what from. I don't know how long. I wake up and there's this pressure, like something's behind me. But when I turn around, there's nothing there. Jinho said nothing. Nia keeps me steady, she said quietly. She always has. Even when I couldn't remember my own name, I remembered hers. Every morning, first thing. A pause. Is that strange? No, he said. That's not strange at all. She looked at him then, directly with the particular quality of attention he remembered, the kind that made you feel both seen and slightly accountable. You're being very careful with your words. I'm always careful with my words. I know, she said. And then she stopped, blinked. The way she'd said it, the certainty of it, automatic and unguarded, had surprised her as much as it surprised him. I don't know why I said that, she said. I don't know you. It's all right, he said. He left her at the window, took the elevator up, sat at his desk and looked at the city coming into light, and understood that this was going to require a steadiness he wasn't sure he had. Do-Yun's first report came on day 2, delivered by hand, no envelope, folded into thirds. They met in the parking structure. Sub-level 2, no cameras on that column, a detail Do-Hyun had identified within his first week on the job 3 years ago and never mentioned until now. No identification, no phone, no financial record in any database Do-Hyun had access to, legal or otherwise. And the woman and the child had been living in a single room above a laundry business in Mapo district for approximately 3 months. The elderly woman who ran the laundry took cash and asked nothing. Before Mapo, a wall, complete absence. The ring, Jinho said. Do-Hyun pulled out a second folded sheet. Commission record from a jeweler in Insadong, 14 years ago. Registered to Seo Jinho, one of a kind. No theft report, no insurance claim. Prince? That's the part that doesn't make sense. Do-Hyun glanced around once. Habit, not nerves. I ran her prints through everything I have access to. She comes back as a ghost. No record in Korea. No record at all. He paused. Except one. A deportation processing record filed 3 months after her disappearance. Someone ran her out of the country officially. Embassy access. I'm an immigration authority, a name on the filing. Whose name? A retired civil servant, died 2 years ago. Someone used his credentials. The parking structure was very quiet. Institutional access, Jinho said. Someone who wanted her gone and wanted it to look procedural, clean, like a door that was never there. Jinho took the papers, folded them, put them inside his jacket. If this story is hitting different, you know what to do, like drop a comment and subscribe. We're just getting started. He told himself he was monitoring her stability. That was the word he used internally. Monitoring, clinical, responsible. The kind of word that created distance between what he was actually doing and what it cost him. What he was actually doing was finding reasons to be in the same room as her. He brought reports to review on the 12th floor. He took calls he could have taken upstairs. He rearranged his afternoon schedule 3 days running and told his assistant it was a security matter, and his assistant, who had worked for him for 6 years and knew better than to ask follow-up questions, simply rearranged the calendar without comment. Zara's memory came in fragments, not waves, nothing so dramatic or merciful as that. Fragments, small, irregular pieces that arrived without warning and left before she could fully examine them. She would be mid-sentence and stop, not searching for a word, not losing her train of thought, but listening, tilting her head slightly as if something just below audible range was trying to reach her. Then she would come back, blink, continue the sentence from exactly where she'd left it, as if no interruption had occurred. What she didn't lose was her body. This was what Jinho noticed first and said nothing about. Her hands knew Seoul, her feet knew the building's rhythms. She'd mapped the 12th floor layout within 24 hours without appearing to try, knew without looking which corridor led where, which elevator bank was faster. She ordered food in Korean on day 3, and the register of it, the particular accent, not textbook, not formal, the accent of someone who learned through daily living, through years of being embedded in this city, hit him somewhere behind the sternum that he'd reinforced. On the morning of day 4, he found her in the small kitchen off the hospitality suite, standing at the counter, watching the kettle. She'd been standing there long enough that the kettle had already clicked off, and the water had gone from boiling to merely hot. "You keep watching me," she said without turning around. "I'm assessing the situation." "You're watching me." He didn't argue. He sat down at the small table. "How did you sleep?" "I dreamed in a language I don't recognize when I'm awake." She finally turned. "Is that something that happens? Remembering things in dreams that you can't access otherwise?" "I don't know," he said. "But I'd say it means the memories are still there. Just rerouted." She looked at him for a moment. "You speak carefully, like you measure things before they leave. Is that a problem?" "No." Something moved across her face. "It's familiar." She said it the way she'd said the other thing, with the automatic certainty of a reflex before the conscious part of her could catch it and add the qualifier. Then the qualifier arrived. "I don't know why I keep saying things like that. Things I shouldn't know." "Don't edit them," he said. "When something comes, just let it." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the cold kettle and switched it on again and didn't say anything else. He left and went upstairs, and he sat at his desk and thought about what he was about to do. Thought about it for a long time. He thought about whether it was cruel or necessary or both. Then he made the call. He had a specific playlist, not his, never used since, that still existed on a private server he'd never been able to bring himself to delete. He pulled one track, an Afrobeats artist she had discovered in her second year in Seoul, playing it on her phone with the speaker turned up in his kitchen on a Sunday, demanding he stop working and listen. A track that no algorithm would surface. A track that had never charted in Korea, never made a playlist, never existed in the listening history of anyone except the two of them. He had it piped through the sound system on the 12th floor while she was in the sitting room. Then he watched through the glass panel in the corridor door. She was reading, or had been reading. The book was still open in her hands. But she had stopped turning pages. She was sitting completely still, her head lifted slightly, the expression on her face doing something complicated and involuntary. She set the book down. Stood up slowly, like someone getting up in the dark and not wanting to disturb anything. Pressed one hand flat against her sternum. Stood like that for 30 seconds. 40. 50. She wasn't crying. It was something anterior to crying. Something that happens before the body decides what to do with a feeling it wasn't prepared to receive. Then she sat back down, picked the book back up, stared at the page without reading it. Jinho stepped back from the glass. He walked to the stairwell and went up 4 floors on foot because he needed the stairs, needed the physical effort of climbing, and needed something to do with what was happening in his chest. She hadn't remembered the song, but her body had recognized it with the certainty of something written at a cellular level. Her body had known that music the way it knew the city, the way it had known to say you're always careful with your words without permission from her conscious mind. Which meant the woman sitting on that couch with her hand pressed to her heart was not gone. She was not a different person. She was Zara, his Zara, the specific and irreplaceable person he had spent 7 years trying to stop loving. Buried under whatever had been done to her, still intact, still present, still reaching toward the surface. And someone had put her there deliberately. He sat on the stairs between the 15th and 16th floors and looked at his hands and thought about what kind of person does that to another human being. He thought about it for a long time. That night he called Do-hyun. Find out who arranged the deportation logistics. Not the name on the filing. The person behind the name. That'll take time. I know, take it. If this story is moving you, hit that like button and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think is really going on. Subscribe and stay with us. On day 5, Nia came to the office alone. Not escorted, not accompanied by any of the building staff Jinho had quietly assigned to their floor. She had waited until Zara was asleep, dressed herself with apparent competence, memorized the route from the 12th floor to the main lobby, taken the elevator by herself, walked to the front desk, and asked for the man from the first night. The receptionist called upstairs, voice slightly uncertain, as if she wasn't sure how to categorize a 6-year-old who had arrived at a corporate headquarters unaccompanied, and was now standing at the desk with the patient expression of someone who had made an appointment and expected to be seen. Jinho came down. Nia looked at him the way she always looked at him, with that unhurried, calculating attention that belonged on an older face. She was wearing a yellow sweater that was slightly too short at the wrists, and her hair had been done carefully. Two neat sections, the kind of careful that comes from a child learning to do it herself because her mother's hands weren't always reliable. "You came alone," Jinho said. "Mama was sleeping. She needed it." Nia said this without apology, as a simple statement of prioritization. "I wanted to talk to you without her listening." He took her upstairs, sat her in the chair across from his desk, the chair where lawyers sat, where board members sat, where people who wanted things from Seo Jinho arranged themselves and tried to look like they weren't nervous. Nia sat in it like it had been made for her and looked around the office with the systematic attention of someone cataloging an environment they may need to recall later. Then she saw it, the framed photograph on the credenza behind his desk. A company anniversary shot, 7 years old. Jinho standing with his senior team in the 22nd floor corridor, everyone in formal dress, someone's idea of documentation. In the background, slightly out of focus but unmistakably present, the door. Dark maritime blue. The color Zara had suggested because she said the corridor felt like a waiting room, and waiting rooms should feel like somewhere worth arriving from. Nia pointed at it. "That's the door." Jinho didn't move. "How did your mother know about that door, Nia?" She thought about this with the genuine seriousness she applied to all questions, turning it over before answering. "She didn't tell me how. She just said, 'Blue door, 22nd floor, Chansung Tower.' I'll say those words and someone will find the man." She paused. "She made me practice until I could say it without thinking." "How old were you when she taught you that?" 4. She said it simply. "She taught me when I was 4. Jinho sat very still. 4 years old, which meant 2 years after Nia was born. Zara, amnesiac, undocumented, living in a city she couldn't fully remember arriving in, had been lucid enough, purposeful enough, to plant an address in her daughter's memory like a key hidden in a wall. "Did she tell you anything else about the man with the blue door?" Nia considered. "She said he was the kind of person who keeps promises even when it's hard." A pause. "She said that was rare. She said most people keep promises when it's easy. That doesn't count." Jinho said nothing for a moment. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moved through its afternoon rhythms, indifferent and continuous. "Nia, how long has your mother been like this? Not remembering things?" "Since before I can remember." She said it without sadness. Not because it didn't affect her, but because she had long since metabolized it as the terms of her life. "But she remembers me. Every single day she remembers me. She says that's the one she protects first." She looked at him directly. "Are you going to help us or just watch?" He held her gaze. "I'm going to help." "Okay." She nodded once, decisively, as if filing the answer. Then she looked around the office again. "Can I have water? The still kind, not the bubbles." He got her water. That evening, Do-hyun arrived at the parking structure with the paper report folded in his coat. When he looked like a man carrying something he wasn't sure how to hand over. "Nia's birth record," he said. "I found it through a regional registry in West Africa. Took 4 days and 3 contacts I'm going to owe favors to." He unfolded the page. "Father listed as unknown." "And the mother's name?" Do-hyun looked at him. "That's the thing. It's not Zara Mensa. It's not any name she's used since she arrived in Korea." He held the page out. "It's her birth name. Full legal name from before she ever left her home country. Before she came here. Before any of this." Jinho looked at the name on the page. He had not heard it spoken in 7 years. He had not let himself think it in at least 4. It was the name she had introduced herself with at a mutual friend's dinner 12 years ago. Hammerna laughing slightly because people always stumbled over it, telling him not to worry, he'd get it eventually. He had gotten it by the end of that first evening. She had looked surprised, said most people didn't bother. He had told her, some things are worth the effort. He stood in the parking structure, holding the paper and understanding what he was looking at. Whoever had buried Zara hadn't just erased her Korean life. They had reached back to her origin point and filed Nia's birth under a name that could only be found if you already knew it existed. This wasn't bureaucratic efficiency. This was deliberate architecture, a labyrinth built by someone with patience and access, and a specific, sustained intention to make this woman unreachable. And they had left exactly one thread loose, the address in the shoe. Who had this kind of access, Do-hyun? Do-hyun folded his hands. Someone institutional, someone with reach in 2 countries, someone who's been maintaining this for 6 years without it unraveling. He paused. Until now. Why now? That, Do-hyun said quietly, is the question I'd be most afraid to answer. If you're watching this and you've got chills right now, you're not alone. Like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment. We read every single one. On day 11, Zara remembered Lagos. She was washing dishes, a mundane, grounding task she had started doing voluntarily because she said it helped her think. When she stopped, set the sponge down, stood with both hands still in the water and said quietly, to no one in particular, I grew up near water, not the ocean, a river, and my grandmother made pepper soup every Sunday, and the smell came through the whole building, every floor. You could track what time it was by when the smell started. She turned around. Her expression was the particular combination of grief and relief that comes from recovering something you didn't know you'd lost until the moment it returned. Jinho was at the kitchen table. He didn't move toward her. Why, he had learned in the past 11 days that moving toward her when something surfaced startled it back under. He stayed still and said, What else? A flight, being cold in a way that felt new, being excited about the cold, like it was a thing that was happening to me specifically. She paused. Coming here, coming to Korea for the first time and thinking, this is the most opposite place from home I could have found, and I want to know all of it. She dried her hands, sat across from him. They stayed like that for a moment, the memory settling between them like something fragile that neither wanted to disturb. Over the following 3 days, the fragments came faster, still out of order. She got feelings before facts, emotional textures before specific events. She remembered loving something before she could identify what. She remembered laughing in a specific kitchen at a specific joke before she could locate whose kitchen it was. She remembered the weight of a particular kind of happiness. Not giddy, not loud, but deep and load-bearing. The kind that makes you feel like you can afford to be still. On day 13, Jinho arrived at the safe house and found her at the small table near the window with a notepad. She had been drawing without apparent intention, the way hands do when they remember what minds don't. He sat across from her and looked at what she'd produced. It was his apartment window, 14 floors up, the specific angle of the Han River Bridge at dawn, the way the near tower caught the early light on its eastern face before anything else. The proportions were exact. What the particular geography of that view? Something you could only reproduce if you had stood at that window enough times that it had written itself into you. She didn't know she'd drawn it. When he looked at it, she glanced down and tilted her head at her own work with mild curiosity, the way you look at something you produced on autopilot. He said nothing about what it was. Instead, he looked up at her and said, Do you trust me? She met his eyes. I don't know you. I know. Do you trust me anyway? A silence. She looked at him the way she'd been looking at him for days, like someone trying to read a text in a language they used to speak. Nia trusts you. She doesn't do that easily or without reason. So, provisionally, yes. I want to move you both, not here, not Chansung Tower, a private residence with no public record. And I have a reason, and I'll explain it when I can explain it fully. You think someone is looking for us. I think someone has always known where you were, and I think something has changed recently that makes your current visibility a risk I'm not willing to accept. She was quiet for a moment. The city moved outside the window. Nia was in the next room asleep, one shoe on as always. Then Zara said, Who are you to me? He looked at her. Not someone, not that answer again. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that wasn't steady at all. Something that had been building for days. Some part of her that was tired of circling the thing everyone in the room already half knew. Actually, who were you to me, actually? He held her gaze for a long moment. Well, you were the person I was going to spend my life with. She received it. Didn't perform shock or reach for deflection. just held the weight of it, turned it over, examined it with that clear and serious attention of hers. And then I disappeared. Yes. Did you look? For 2 years, every resource I had, every contact, every investigator Do-hyun could reach across 3 countries. And then? And then I was told, advised, strongly, that continuing was causing damage. To me, to the company, that I needed to accept what the evidence suggested and move forward. He paused. I signed a death in absentia declaration, 14 months after you disappeared. The words landed in the room like something irreversible, which they were. She looked at him for a long time after he said it. Huh, who advised you? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her hands on the table, at the ring catching the afternoon light, amber line following its quiet circuit around the band, the engraving on the inside that she still hadn't asked him to translate. My father, he said. Something shifted in her expression. Not recognition, not yet, but the specific alertness of a person whose instincts have just registered a frequency their conscious mind hasn't caught up to. Tell me about your father, she said. He looked at her, at the drawing of his window between them on the table, at the ring she had carried through 7 years of not knowing what it meant, never once removing it, her body keeping faith with something her mind couldn't access. I will, he said, but not tonight. Tonight I need you to pack what you and Nia have. Not if we leave in an hour. She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she stood up, folded the drawing without looking at it, and put it in her pocket. Do-hyun's paper report arrived on day 16. Jinho was at the safe house when it came. Not at his office, not at Chansung Tower, but sitting at the kitchen table of a residence registered under a company name, 3 layers removed from anything that pointed back to Seo Jinho. He had been there most mornings since the move. He told himself it was a security measure. He told himself that with decreasing conviction each day. Do-hyun handed him the folded pages without ceremony and stood by the window while Jinho read. The deportation filing traced back through 3 administrative proxy layers, each one a shell, each one dissolving when examined, each one pointing to the next until the chain terminated at a single private legal firm, Yongshin Partners. Generational practice. The kind of firm whose name appeared on no website, no directory, no public record. The kind of firm you only knew existed if someone who mattered had told you. Yongshin Partners had one client relevant to Jinho's world, Chairman Seo Jinho, his father. Jinho read the name in his father's own legal context and set the paper down on the table and did not move for a long time. Do-hyun said nothing. He understood the particular quality of this silence. The amnesia, Jinho said finally. His voice was level, controlled. The voice he used in boardrooms when something had gone badly wrong and he needed the room to believe it hadn't. The deportation, I understand. That's logistics. That's access and paperwork and a dead man's credentials. But the amnesia is not a side effect of being put on a plane. No, Do-hyun said. It isn't. So he hired people. And those people did something beyond what he instructed. That's the most favorable interpretation. What's the least favorable? Do-hyun turned from the window. That he knew what they were capable of and hired them anyway, because the outcome was acceptable to him. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere in the back of the house, Nia was explaining something to herself in a low, continuous voice. She did that sometimes, narrated her own activities like a documentary, a habit Zara found both alarming and deeply endearing. Jinho folded the papers, put them inside his jacket, stood up. I'm going to see him. I'm going to see him today. He didn't go to his father's office. He went to the house, the Seo family estate in the Northern Hills, 40 minutes from the city, where every hallway was wide enough to feel like a statement, and every room had been arranged to communicate something about the family's position in the world. He had grown up inside that communication, had absorbed it so completely that for most of his adult life, he hadn't been able to see it for what it was. Chairman Seo Jinho was in his study, silver-haired, 73, reading something. He sat face down when Jinho entered, a gesture of control, not courtesy. He looked at his son with the expression of a man who had been expecting this visit and had decided not to be moved by it. You found her, he said, not a question. Tell me what you did. A pause. His father set his hands flat on the desk. I protected this family. The way I have always protected this family. That woman, her name is Zara, was a liability you were too emotionally compromised to assess clearly. A foreign woman with no ties to this country, no family here, no cultural footing in our world, no accountability. She could have taken everything you built and walked away with it the moment it suited her. She wasn't trying to take anything. You don't know that. I knew her. You were in love with her, his father said, with the tone of someone identifying a cognitive impairment. That is not the same thing. Jinho looked at him, at the face he had spent 41 years trying to satisfy and 15 years pretending he didn't need to. You had her deported. You used a dead civil servant's credentials. You had people. He stopped, breathed. What did they do to her? The people you hired. What did they do beyond putting her on a plane? His father's eyes moved away. Just slightly. Just for a moment. But Jinho had been reading that face his entire life. That was not part of my instruction. But you knew. I was told there were complications during the process. I was told they had been managed. Managed. Jinho said the word back to him slowly. She has spent 6 years not knowing her own name. Her daughter grew up with a mother who couldn't remember where she came from. Nia is 6 years old and she navigated this city alone to find me because her mother planted my address in her memory when she was 4 years old, because that was the only option she had left. His voice had not risen. That was the thing about Seo Jinho when he was most serious. He got quieter, not louder. And you sat across from me at her memorial and handed me a handkerchief. His father said nothing. You watched me grieve a woman you knew was alive. Still nothing. Jinho reached into his jacket and placed the folder on his father's desk. Every document, every trail Do-Yun had assembled over 16 days. Proxy layers, credential records, Yongshin partners' fingerprints on the filing, all of it laid out with the clean, irrefutable logic of a man who had spent his career in logistics and understood that the most devastating thing you could do to a system was trace it completely. You're going to step back from the company board, voluntarily, health reasons, within the month. He straightened. If anything happens to Zara, to Nia, to Do-Hyun, or to me, this goes to 5 separate destinations simultaneously. Journalists, prosecutors, are 2 people in the government you have spent 30 years cultivating. Everything. His father looked at the folder, then at his son. You would do this to your own family. You did this to mine first, Jinho said. He walked out, didn't look back, drove 40 minutes back to the city with both hands on the wheel and the radio off in the particular stillness of a man who has just done something that cannot be undone and has made his peace with that before doing it. He had one more thing left to do. He called Zara from the car. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Where are you? Driving back. I need to tell you something when I get there. All of it. Everything I know. A pause. Okay, she said. Then, Jinho, are you all right? He looked at the road ahead, at the city beginning to appear on the horizon, lit up and continuous and indifferent the way cities always are. I will be, he said. I think I will be. She remembered everything on day 17, not gradually, not in the gentle, incremental way the fragments had been arriving, one texture at a time, one feeling before its fact. All of it came back at once, at 3 a.m., in the small bedroom of the safe house, while the city outside was doing its quietest work and Nia was asleep down the hall. She sat up in the dark and it hit her like a door blown open by wind. Everything on the other side rushing in simultaneously. 7 years of compressed memory arriving with the full force of something that had been held back a very long time. The apartment, the ring, the inscription she had asked him to translate 3 times because she wanted to memorize the Yoruba and never quite managed it. The argument the week before she disappeared, not a bad argument, not a damaging one, or just the ordinary friction of 2 people negotiating how much of themselves to give and how fast. The Sunday she had stood at his window watching the Han River at dawn and thought, without drama, without announcement, this is where I belong. The men who stopped beside her on the street, the car, the flight she hadn't chosen, a window seat, clouds beneath her, soul disappearing, arriving somewhere that wasn't soul and understanding, with a clarity that the later amnesia would bury, but could not erase entirely, that she had been removed, deliberately, by someone with enough reach to make it look like nothing, the years after. Memory returning in pieces, never fully, never reliably. Nia being born into a life that was supposed to be temporary. Zara always believing in whatever part of herself remained intact. That temporary was what it was, that she would find her way back, that there was something on the other side worth navigating toward. The morning she had sat on the floor of a room above a laundry in Mapo district with a 4-year-old on her lap and understood that her body was not going to hold out indefinitely, that the blank walls in her memory were not getting smaller, that the most important thing she could do, the one purposeful, directional thing, was give Nia a destination. Blue door, 22nd floor, Chansung Tower. She had made Nia practice it until the words were reflexive, until they lived below thought, in the same place the city's subway map lived, in the same place the ring lived, in the body below the reach of whatever had been done to her mind. She picked up her phone, called Jinho at 3:30 a.m. When he answered on the first ring, she knew from the sound of him, immediate, fully present, no fog of sleep, that he hadn't been sleeping either. "I remember," she said, a silence. "The kind that has weight. All of it? All of it." Another silence. Then his voice, careful as always, every word arriving like it had been considered before being released. "How are you?" She almost laughed. Of all the questions available to him in this moment, and she understood there were many, she understood he had been carrying a warehouse of questions for 17 days. He had chosen that one, the small one, the one that put her first. She did laugh, actually. It broke slightly in the middle. "I don't know yet. I think I'm angry. And I think underneath the angry, there's something that isn't angry at all." "What is it?" "Relief." She looked at the dark window, the city a low amber glow beyond the glass. "That you're real, that I didn't construct you. There were times I thought maybe I'd invented you. Maybe you were something my mind made up to have something to hold on to. You didn't invent me. I know that now." A breath. "What did you find out? About what happened?" He told her. All of it. The deportation filing, the dead civil servant's credentials, Yongshin Partners, his father's name at the end of the chain. He told her in the same quiet, level voice he used for everything that mattered. Not softening it, not managing her reaction, just giving her the truth in the straightforward way she had always deserved and had not always been given. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He watched you grieve me," she said. "Yes," and said nothing. "No." She absorbed this. "What did you do?" "I went to see him today. It's handled. He won't be a problem. Not for you, not for Nia, not for any of this. Doyen has everything backed up in places that guarantee it. Are you okay? You asked me that already. I'm asking again." A pause. "He was the blueprint," Jinho said. "The version of myself I spent 40 years building toward. And I walked out of that house today and I don't want to be that version anymore. I think I stopped wanting it a long time ago and didn't have a reason to admit it." A beat. "Sora, you were always the reason I could see the difference." She held the phone and looked at the dark ceiling and felt something settle in her chest that had not been settled in a very long time. "What happens now?" she said. "Whatever you want. Genuinely. You've had 7 years of other people deciding what happens. I'm not adding to that list. I want Naya to be safe. She is. I want the people who did this to answer for it. That's already moving. And I want—" She stopped. The sentence was there, complete, fully formed. She knew what it was. She had known it since the moment all the memories came back, and she'd understood that through 7 years of not knowing his name, she had never once taken the ring off. Had never once, in confusion, in fear, in the long, anonymous years of not knowing who she was, removed it. Some part of her had known, had kept faith with something it couldn't name. "You don't have to say it tonight," he said quietly. "I know." A breath. "But I want to. I've spent 7 years not being able to say what I want. I don't want to wait anymore." She said it. On the other end of the line, Seo Jinho, the most controlled man she had ever known, A man who had spent 41 years treating emotion as a variable to be managed, made a sound that wasn't words, something that existed before language, something shaped like relief and grief arriving simultaneously, like a door opened after a very long time in the dark. 6 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday, Nia decided Jinho was acceptable. She communicated this not through announcement but through action. She began saving him the seat beside her at dinner without being asked. She also began correcting his pronunciation of Yoruba words Zara was teaching her, which meant she had appointed herself a standard of authority on the matter, which meant she trusted him enough to find him improvable. Zara was in therapy twice a week, a specialist in trauma-related memory disruption who had a small practice in Mapo, 2 streets from the laundry above which they had once lived. She was also in a Korean language class, which Jinho found quietly amusing, given that her Korean had always been better than most of his staff. She went because she said she wanted to learn it on her own terms this time, to own it, to choose it. The case against the men his father had hired moved through private arbitration. Consequences were occurring in the specific, unglamorous, sustainable way that real consequences occur. Without drama, without a scene, with the steady pressure of documentation and people who knew where all the files were backed up. Chairman Seo had stepped down from the board. Health reasons, the announcement said. No one in Jinho's world had pushed back or asked questions. Some people understood when they read it that health reasons was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. They said nothing. That was also a kind of answer. Jinho had moved a second chair to the window in his apartment, the window with the Han River view, the one Zara had drawn from memory without knowing she was drawing it. He didn't tell her he'd done it. She noticed on her second visit back to the apartment and said nothing, just sat in it, like she'd always been there. The ring was still on her finger. He had asked her about it once, indirectly. Would the way he asked everything that mattered, approaching it from the side rather than head-on, because directness about the things that most concerned him had always been his particular difficulty, and she had always been his particular patience. She had looked at him across the table with the expression she reserved for his indirectness, not impatience, just the specific fond recognition of a person who knows exactly what you're doing and has decided to let you do it while also not letting you get away with it. I didn't know what it was, she said, but I knew I was supposed to keep it. Some things you just know. He thought about that for a long time in the months that followed, how she had carried the ring through 7 years of not knowing what it meant, how Nia had carried an address through 6 years of not understanding why, how the two of them had navigated an entire labyrinth using only what he had actually given them, a piece of jewelry with a promise on the inside and a reputation for keeping his word. It turned out that was enough. It had always been enough. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If this one moved you, and we think it did, like this video, leave a comment telling us your favorite moment, and subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. We'll see you in the next one.